Andrew Wilson goes head to head with this feminist in a big debate that leaves the woke feminist with no choice but to admit that he's right. Now, the debate is on alimony, where you all know that is also an area of expertise from Andrew Wilson, so to speak, because Andrew Wilson has had a lot of debates on this particular topic, and he's in this case he's actually putting out views as well as thoughts and of some interesting points that would makes this feminist go ahead and rethink about her position on it almost and stuff. So here we are with Andrew Wilson debating this feminist to admit that he is right. Let's go ahead and get right into it.
In what situations would I say that
because
financial support is not an obligation?
I'll restate it. So if these circumstances are conditional, every condition is going to have a different prescription that you would give. Let's start with the prescription you would give when you think it is okay to leave a woman destitute.
Well, I don't know that I would say that it's ever okay to leave someone destitute. I'm sure there are people.
Regardless of what they do?
You know, I can only speak for myself, but that's not in my nature. That's not something I would ever do to somebody. Even if they had treated me really badly, I would still, just my own sense of integrity wouldn't allow me to do that. I understand, though, that, everybody's different. Everybody processes that kind of thing different. Not everybody is such a forgiving person. And, maybe sometimes that forgiveness isn't even warranted.
Well, then I don't understand, actually. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. And by the way, if I'm cutting in too much, you can tell me. But just for the purpose of, moving the conversation along, I don't understand how it's not a universal claim from you then. How can it not be universal if at the same time you're saying, you would never do it? Are you just saying I would never do it, so from my own preference that's not okay, but it's not universal? Or what do we mean by this here?
I wouldn't say it's universal. Not everybody has the same personal equation. And the types of people I would get into relationships with are going to be different than the types of people somebody else might get into a relationship with. I don't find myself getting into relationships with people that would really ever come up. So as to the universality of it, that was never my position to begin with. That is what everybody else who had kind of attacked me for it interpreted as, despite my repeated protestations to the contrary. So, I wouldn't say that there's no circumstance in which one should not just up and leave. If somebody cheats on you and betrays you, I can't really say that, oh, well, this person completely betrayed you, you need to still support them financially. I could totally understand why somebody wouldn't want to do that.
So then,
and I don't.
So would that be okay? Would you, from your view, are you still holding your integrity, and are you still holding to your morality? If you walk in and your sister's banging your brother, and you just turn around and, I'm sorry, not your sister, your wife is banging your brother or something, and
I
you
don't
just
come
turn
from
around
that
and
kind
walk
of
out.
family.
Yeah. But you just turn around and walk out, right? You turn around and walk out, and you're like, I've had it, right? And you take all of your stuff and you leave. Is the man doing something wrong there?
No, I wouldn't say that it's wrong.
Okay, so here's the thing. A lot of many Western countries, including here in the U.S., have what's called no-fault divorce laws, which allows couples to end a marriage without actually proving any wrongdoing. And they still have made separation more accessible to alimony since their widespread adoption in the 1970s and stuff. Now, a lot of people who criticize this often argue that, the two lovers, this lowers the barrier of the for exiting the marriage and stuff, turning into a gamble where one person, often the higher earner, usually men, often bears the disproportionate costs and stuff, where women would initiate about 70% of divorces, rising now to 80 to 90% among college educated women and stuff, which some actually have that to do with factors like, what's called hypergamy, meaning seeking a better partner, or seeking a better man, usually who someone has more money and stuff, or who they think is much more attractive. And is then also for reasons of dissatisfaction where they're not being satisfied by their husband anymore. But others point to like what's called like certain incentives that's systemic favoring women in these settlements. Okay, so a lot of men are avoiding marriage nowadays because of the fact that they've seen people that they know or even their fathers who were divorced having to pay alimony and stuff, and that's something that that's also making it look bad for like a lot of other women who wants to get married one day. But the problem is that like a lot of men have actually woke up to the fact that this is one of the highest risks that and consequences that they're afraid of facing and stuff if they got married, or let alone being in a relationship also. And the fact of the matter is that when that happens, well, the dating market is actually getting worse for a lot of women out there, which is already happening right now. I mean, that's why a lot of men are choosing MGTOW, which stands for men going their own way, where they refuse to not date any woman or look for a woman to marry and stuff like that because of consequences like this, because you have like a lot of bad women out there who are making it worse for other women and men and stuff with their greedy and selfish attitudes and character. Just go ahead and use a man for a paycheck, whether it be through child support or even alimony.
Like, I would say he'd
So
be
then,
well within his rights to do that.
So then, actually, what we have established is it's your view that for you personally, you wouldn't do it. But as far as the universal claims go, that men should never leave their women destitute, that's actually not true. There's many cases where if a man leaves his woman destitute, you would actually agree with that. Is that right?
I hate to say agree, because part of me is kind of like, I just there's just something about it that doesn't feel right. But
well, then is the claim universal?
Yeah, no, it's not a universal claim. It never was a universal
So then there must
claim.
there must be like some agreement there somewhere, right?
I could understand why someone would do that, and I would not really be able to condemn them for it, even though it may not be a choice that I personally would make for myself.
So then it's not immoral for them to do it, and you wouldn't actually have well, I mean, how could you? What would the disagreement there be then? Just ick? Like it just kind of gives you the ick? Is that the totality of the disagreement?
I wouldn't characterize it as the ick. I just don't like to see people have suffering inflicted on them. But at the same time, I'm like, well, actions have consequences, and if you want to go and like bang your husband's brother and he catches you, like, can you really blame him for just slamming the door and walking out? I like to think that people could be adult about these things and still come back and say, like, yeah, obviously we can't still be in a relationship together, but can we just be mature and amicable about the division of assets and so on and so forth?
Well, maybe we can take it one step further.
I know a lot of people can't do that.
And I'll ask you a different question. Is there instances in which leaving the woman completely destitute would likely actually be good for her?
Yeah, possibly.
So then if there's cases...
some people do need to hit rock bottom in order to change.
So then if we can agree that there's circumstances in which leaving them destitute would be good for them, then wouldn't the morally righteous thing to be to leave them more destitute?
Yeah, potentially, if it's getting into a scenario where your support is going to enable them.
So then it sounds like we actually have no ought for why you shouldn't leave them destitute, but we do have at least some oughts for why you should.
Fair enough.
If that's the case, I think you got to revamp your position and say that there's cases where men ought to leave their women destitute, which would be the inverse of what the debate prompt is, right?
Yeah, that's the first step of where she will have to admit that Andrew Wilson is right. You see, for those of you who don't know, alimony or like financial spousal support is a big deterrent and stuff for men and stuff. It's usually designed to help the lower earning spouse maintain, their standard of living after the divorce, but in practice, and it's often awarded to women more than men, even if they work based on factors like marriage length, income disparity, and even, contributions to the household, like vis-a-vis childcare. Now, she did go ahead and admit that Andrew Wilson is right on because of the fact that she didn't really have the stance of like there's actually mitigating factors where women should be left with out any alimony because of the simple fact of the matter is there are, extenuating factors such as, forms of adultery and stuff, and as well as, how and how serious the matter was. But the thing is, it's like depending on the judges out there, and that's the unfortunate part because today's system is often in favor of women rather than men, especially the fact that there's actually good men out there who didn't do anything wrong and stuff, and they had to pay alimony out of pocket based on what was made up by the lawyers as well as what was made up by the woman usually. And Andrew Wilson actually has her thinking about her stance about this particular topic of alimony because guess what, men fear being ordered to pay any ongoing support for women that they're not with anymore, sometimes for life in long marriages, while losing half their assets, retirement savings, and even the family income. Okay. So point blank, for instance, in no fault scenarios, a wife can divorce without any cause, yet the husband will still owe alimony if he earns more, leading to phrases like, it's cheaper to keep her. Okay, something I've heard since I was a kid. I didn't understand that until I was an adult.
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay. Well, I will happily take that as a concession on part one, and we can move into part two if you'd like.
I mean, I don't know that I would say like he ought to do this. I don't, as a general rule, I'm not big on telling people what they should or should not do.
What do you mean?
I'm big on guiding principles. Make your decision according to those guiding principles. But when it comes to like what actions are you going to take, if somebody comes and asks me for advice, should I leave my wife destitute? I mean, well, what are the circumstances? I'm even if he lays out a really good case as to why he should leave her destitute, I would still come back and say, well, I can't really tell you what to do. You have to make that decision for yourself. I'm not going to put my stamp of approval on it, is what I'm saying, one way or the other.
Yeah, but why not? Like, if you would think that this was a good thing, it'd be the same thing. Like, I could give you examples, perhaps, of a child who is inside the house. They're a grown child, right? They're like 16, 17. And they often steal from their parents or something like this, right? Mm-hmm. By having the child there, continuing to allow them to steal, you are actually enabling that behavior, right?
Yes, you would be.
Yeah, you'd be enabling it. So I would see it as a moral ought to say, well, I think it'd probably be a good idea for you to stop allowing them at 18, 19, 20 years old when they're adults to continue to come into your home and victimize you. And it's through that exercise of boundaries that they perhaps will learn their lesson that they're not allowed to do this because of the enablement. I can make the same case on women who are promiscuous or perhaps routine cheaters, that absent the consequence of them actually having serious repercussions for the behavior, they have no incentive to change that behavior. You could even make the case with men if this is the case, right? If that's so, and I think we'd have to agree that it is, how could you actually say we ought not do that in those circumstances? Because it seems to be like we ought do that in those circumstances.
In some extreme circumstances, maybe. Like if the person that's asking for some financial support is a drug addict or something, and you know that all the money you give them is just going to be poured into their drug habit, that's inevitably going to lead them down a terrible, terrible path.
So if you had a junkie wife, leave her destitute.
Yeah, like in a case like that. But again, these are extreme cases where the answers are a little bit easier, and most people's relationships are not. I think most breakups exist more in a gray area.
Look.
Actually, she was almost right into that last part. You see, there's a lot of women out there who will actually say anything or put any kind of claim or lie out there just to go ahead and get money. They'll use their children and stuff to go ahead and get money through child support. They also use different lies and bold claims and a lot of buzzwords and stuff to go ahead and twist it in their favor, just go ahead and get more money. I mean, there's like a lot lot of women out there right now who's been in relationships or even marriages where they forced they try to make the man pay for their lifestyle. I mean, there's people in relationships and stuff who left their boyfriend and stuff and then found a new man and then came back to the boyfriend and asked him to pay for buy her this or that and also to continue to fund her lifestyle when they're not together anymore. I mean, it literally like to pay for her car insurance, other bills, get her nails done, hair done, all of that, and yet they don't get it, that they're not with him anymore, let alone not even married. I mean, there's even women out there who got tricked athletes, younger athletes, to go ahead and pay child support. The woman who's like 38 or 39 years old and stuff got a basketball player and stuff, got pregnant with his child, and then just he decided he doesn't want the baby, told her to get rid of the baby and everything, and then next thing you know, he tells her that he doesn't want anything to do with her and the baby. He told her straight up from the beginning he doesn't want kids and stuff, and he agreed to go ahead and pay the lump sum. He decided to pay the lump sum of $1 million and stuff. Thing is that it was set up in a way where no adjustments were going to be coming and stuff, since it was a lump sum. And then she already spent over like $100,000 in that child support that was awarded to her. And they can't go and back into restructure it due to like the adjustments of inflation for the years to come. Okay, so that right there, like for the women out there who have ill motives and stuff, ill intentions and stuff, they should be left destitute, because all that's on their mind is just greed and stuff, the love of money and stuff to keep their lifestyle going and stuff. It's not for, to help them, get better. It's for them to stay selfish and get even more greedy.
I agree. I'm going to give you all the olive branch I possibly can. I tend to agree with you that these are more the edge cases than the commons, though I don't think that the blindsiding the men with divorce is an edge case. I think that that's actually fairly common. But that aside, leaving that aside, when it comes to the idea of I believe that men should support women they're no longer with, and then the qualifier is, well, based on conditionals. If I can give you sufficient conditionals in which it would actually behoove the woman to be left destitute, then that seems like it would cripple this entire position, because you would be saying then, no, there's circumstances where you actually ought to do that and that is the most moral thing to do, right?
In some extreme circumstances, yes.
Yeah. So then I don't think we even need to go any further with that. The case in the proposition of should men leave their women destitute, the conclusion is to this, sometimes, right? Sometimes, at least.
Maybe sometimes, but
Sometimes.
I would say not in the majority of cases. And,
I'm actually even willing to engage with that. I'm actually even willing to engage with whether or not it should be done in the majority of cases. So if it is the case that everything is done from you through the prism of perspective ethics, or the ethical purview of, I'm guessing, what you think is what is moral or what ought be done, is that the case? There's no universals you ascribe to?
I mean, I do subscribe to certain moral universals, just not necessarily in a case like this.
Not stance-independent ones, though?
Sorry, say that again?
They're not stance-independent? Like you're not basing them on anything other than your own personal stance?
A lot of it is based on my personal stance, sure.
Yeah. So
a lot of my position on this is based on my perspective of the world, how I would handle things, how I have handled things, the expectations I've had of partners that I've broken up with, and so forth. And I realize that most people don't engage on that level. I realize that a lot of breakups are really nasty, and that a lot of people don't have the emotional maturity to split in an amicable way, even in the face of like some kind of a betrayal or something like that. So I recognize that on the one hand, the standards that I have in my own life are maybe not applicable to everybody or even reasonable for everybody. And I didn't.
I'm actually willing to just engage as is with the stance, and instead of trying to beat you up on whether or not I think the meta-ethical or metaphysics or anything is consistent, that can be a very boring debate. I'm actually just kind of willing to grant the stance for the purpose of the argument. So, if it is the stance that most of what you would consider an ought or things like this, or most of what you consider to be moral, is not stance independent, but basically comes from you. My guess, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you're looking for kind of the best social outcomes for people, right? That's
you can put it that way.
Well, that makes sense to me, right? I think that in almost every ethical system, it's really hard to get away from the fact that we're still trying to look for good social outcomes, and all these ethical systems are driving kind of towards that in their own way, right? Would you kind of grant that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So so I'm going to make a different argument now based on the majority claim, the claim that the majority shouldn't. I would actually believe that socially, the outcomes for society over the long term would be better if more people left the opposition destitute and they had to deal with the consequences of the failed relationship without the aid of the state and without the aid of court enforcement, which would then provide aid. They'd actually have to work their problems out and things like this. And I actually would argue that that would probably be better for society, ultimately.
Yeah, I'd actually agree with that. I'm not a big fan of the court system. I think a lot of the pushback I got on this was from, men who kind of perceived me as advocating for, what they kind of call divorce rate or something, which isn't the case at all. Like, I'm not, I'm very anti-state in that regard. And I think if there was not the ability to just kind of take your problems before a judge and get greedy lawyers involved and everything, like,
you would have to actually deal with the problems, right?
Yeah.
So then now it seems like we have actually an ought against even the majoritarian claim of destitute. Like, most relationships, you shouldn't leave the other person destitute. Isn't it actually true that if in the majority of the cases people were left destitute and the aid of the state wasn't coming in to kind of push that person up, that they would actually have to deal with these problems alone without that social safety net? They would probably actually have to start working those problems out. Wouldn't that actually be a really good counterclaim against the claim of even the majority here?
I don't know that it's necessarily a counterclaim, because it kind of implies that I was suggesting that people use the state to achieve these ends, which is not a claim that I ever made.
No. Hang on. Let me qualify.
Go ahead.
I don't believe that you ever made such a claim, but I do believe that that would be an entailment of the claim. So I think that it is an entailment of the claim when you're talking about leaving them destitute and why you ought not do that. That if I'm saying, well, socially, I think that the ramifications of doing that would lead to better social outcomes, and you say, well, I tend to agree because of the court system and things like this, then that would be an entailment of that position, right?
I suppose you can characterize it that way.
Yeah. So, I mean, if that's the case, then I think I've made a really good argument for why even in the majority of cases, I wouldn't even grant that you shouldn't leave them destitute in the majority of them. So on the conditional cases, we've now agreed. And now in the majority of cases, I think we've even found some.
Yeah, so Andrew Wilson basically got her to admit that he was right. And, I mean, all of this is over, a lot of women out there who are just simply greedy and selfish and stuff, and like basically evil and bitter and stuff, especially those who went on ahead and just initiate the breakup or the divorce or whatever. And you know what? It's like all because, they're not happy while the guy's literally doing everything that, she wanted him to do. There's women out there who will leave these men because they're too good to them, too nice, and so on and so forth and stuff. But rather than just, embracing it, they just decide to go ahead and throw it away for someone worse or something worse and stuff, and then try to go ahead and get some sort of financial benefit from it and stuff. And all the while, still later on, they go ahead and run into ruin and stuff where Andrew Wilson will often talk about these things where they're not going to be happy anymore. They'll find a guy, a new guy, date him, and then no happiness to come out of it because they're all still going home to a lonely pillow and stuff that's soaked with tears and stuff. So, fact of the matter is that Andrew Wilson so eloquently actually got this feminist here to go ahead and see his viewpoints. And this woman, I mean, I'll admit it, she's the calmest debater that I've seen him debate to date and stuff. And Andrew Wilson actually didn't even have to, shut her down or anything, and she didn't even assault Andrew Wilson either. So I actually enjoyed this particular debate. Let me know your thoughts about this and the Andrew Wilson debate with the woke feminists on the subject on alimony. And I'll see you on the next one. Until then, peace.